tools are now available to them, and they are all up to date so that they can share that with their clients. Again, this has been one of those that it's taken a while, but I think as we go through this process and you start using it and you give me more feedback, we will make it even better. Hopefully, you know, we can go and, you know, spend time with you. We'd love to do Train the Trainer. I actually thought about hosting one here in our downtown office. We have a nice, huge training facility, and we can invite you in. And whoever you're, you know, think that might benefit from this type of program, so that we can go over it thoroughly with you so that you are well informed too, because I know that once you're dealing with those clients, you have a lot of questions that are thrown at you and you may not be sure about it. So now you'll have those tools and the most updated tools regarding our office and how to get them in and out of here. Our goal, like you, is to, you know, make sure that they have a good experience and they're able to get those essential documents so that they can start on with their lives here in the United States. Any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I see Deborah put the link in the chat. Thank you for doing that, Deborah. I was trying to get it in the chat too. It's a tremendous resource. One question I have is, do you think that this will be something that we will be able to see happen in other surrounding counties?
Well, that was my goal, is once I get us launched and that we're all happy, and that means including you, because I want to make sure this is useful and that we're really making an impact with our clients, so that I'll need that feedback from you. And once we have this and we say, yes, this is really working and very helpful, then I will certainly then share it with other tax collector offices. I've mentioned it to them and they are all on board and want this. The exciting thing is that we will be the first in the state to launch this type of program. So I'm really excited. Excited about the team right here at Hillsborough County Tax Collector's Office, who, you know, we see the same clients you're seeing. And the pain points that we have is that we have to sit there and go through this almost like a whole orientation. And so we're hoping that this will streamline that process so they'll be well informed. And it also takes a little bit of the burden off of you. And so this is a great collaborative initiative. And thank you, Janet and Lutheran Services, for helping me too. And actually, we had Hispanic Social Services also review the booklet with us and gave us a thumbs up. So once we get that going here, and we really want to promote this and celebrate our success together. So that's another thing on the plan, is really celebrating this together, and that we're trying to work well with all of our agencies to provide a service for all Hillsborough County residents, new and those that are here and been here. So this is really a huge initiative that we're really proud to see it come to fruition. And I'm sure that it will be shared across the state.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's so impressive that you've gotten this completely, you know, online in such a short period of time. And we look forward to working with you on Train the Trainer classes. I know USF's professors, Dylan Mahoney is anxious to do translation into Swahili, and we have other languages too. This comes at a great time where we're growing the immigrant community in Tampa Bay, and it's going to be very useful, helping a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda, I believe we've met our presenters before. But I think they've just introduced themselves at the task force meetings in the past. But today they're here to talk with us about the work that they do with the FBI. Mark and Susanna from the Office of the FBI will talk to us about the Civil Rights Program. And Mark's going to share a little bit about his personal story of coming to this country as a refugee and how he ended up working for the FBI. So thank you for being here, Mark and Susanna. And it looks like David's got your slideshow queued up here. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Susanna Mapu. I'm a special agent assigned to our Tampa field office. our office is located near the airport. We also have resident offices or agencies, which we call satellite offices in Pinellas, Lakeland, Sarasota, Orlando, Brevard, and
Fort Myers.
Fort
I
Myers.
mentioned Fort Myers. Yeah, we're all over the place. 18 counties in Central and Southwest Florida. And I'm Mark Zajac, and I'm an intelligence analyst here assigned to the Tampa office as well. And it's really great to be with you. And before we get started, I didn't know that my pastor, Sally Campbell Evans, was going to be on this call. So just a special shout out to her before we get going. Go ahead.
And the reason we wanted to introduce ourselves to you, so you can put a name to a face, also to let you know that the FBI is here, we're available, and we realize that refugees are a vulnerable community. So we just wanted you to have a direct contact for us if you need it. Next slide, please. This is going to be Mark telling his very personal story.
All right. Well, thank you all so much again for having us. And I think the way that we're going to do this is I'll talk about my story, and then Susanna is going to talk on the back end of this, talk about the Civil Rights Program and the kind of work that we do here. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I've served in the Bureau as an intelligence analyst for 17 years, all of that here in the Tampa office. I've served various crime issues, national security issues, and currently I serve as the intelligence analyst on our domestic terrorism squad, which is the squad that handles the types of racially motivated violent extremists and hate crimes that impact our immigrant communities, and our minority communities, such as what we saw in Buffalo over the weekend. But I want to stress that I'm not here really just as a representative of the FBI. This is something that's very personal to me. I'm a refugee myself, and I want to speak as a representative of the folks who your organizations serve as refugees. And I feel like I'm representing them in this discussion. So I'm dating myself here in this black and white picture. It's kind of crazy, but this is my dad and I somewhere in the hills of Poland, which is where I grew up in the late 1970s. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, of course, at that time. My parents were always been heavily involved in the church. And when I say church, most people in Poland are Catholic, but not my folks. They were evangelical Protestants. So my father was involved in the church. My grandfather was the pastor. My mom was involved as well. And during that time, it was a communist regime, so they suffered at the hands of the authorities. I know my dad was questioned, my uncle was arrested. And so at some point during that time, in 1980 or 81, they made a decision to leave Poland and to start over. And at that time, the nuclear family was considered a flight risk, right? So the communist government wouldn't allow you to leave, but as a family unit. So they would force one parent to sort of stay behind, knowing that a young family was a flight risk. My parents, actually, after many attempts, we were able to get permission to leave the country and go to Greece on a vacation. And it was my entire family, so my mom, my dad, and my brother and myself. And we went to Greece. And then on the way back, we were able to make it into Austria, which was sort of a neutral country at that time. And sort of the defining moment of my life was when they pulled the car over, and they basically said, words I couldn't fathom, which is, we're not going back. And they had kept this from us. They didn't want us telling our friends or neighbors or people that we knew, because they didn't want the authorities to stop it. So this was something just out of the blue. And it was something that really is a fulcrum point in my own life, just because it changed everything for me forever. They basically said, we're not going to Poland. We're going to try to make it to the West. And I remember sitting on that roadside because I was 8 years old, and I was trying to convince them not to go through with it. I used every trick that an 8-year-old could come up with, and it was coming from the heart. It was just, look, I don't speak English. How am I going to communicate with my teachers? What's going to happen to my friends? all of those things, raced through my mind, and I thought about the implications right away, and I was begging him not to do it. Now, my brother, on the other hand, who is 14 months younger, he just basically was like, look, there's more food in the West. I'm down with this. Let's go. So we had different reactions to this. But the reason I bring that up is like, that's a roadside moment. I call that my roadside moment. And, you, and through your organizations, you have the privilege and the honor of being there for people, in those similar roadside moments. And I'm thinking specifically about kids that and children that have already gone through that kind of situation, where they're in that situation. They know things have changed. They know things have changed forever. And they don't know how to process it or deal with it. And it's the same thing that happened to me. And I think the question for you, is how can you be there, particularly for the kids, which is what I really identify with in those roadside moments. And, for me, when I was there and my parents were making that decision, I wasn't there by myself. I wasn't there. We were not alone. And what happened was my father, through his work with the church, had help, people that helped him. And also we were helped by an organization, maybe like some of your organizations. And so what I'm holding up here, my parents had left everything. So we didn't have money to go west. But we were given, and this is 41 years old. I'll just read a little bit of it for you. There was an organization called the Tolstoy Foundation, which basically paid for the cost of our flight to America. And we had to repay that money. But the point is there was somebody there, in that moment of need, in that roadside moment, there was an organization that can meet that need so that you weren't by yourself. And so my challenge to you, is that you have the privilege and the honor to be there for those people. And I hope that you're able to do that, particularly the kids. Now, as far as back to my story, when we got to the refugee camp in Austria, living conditions, they were not terrible, but it wasn't great either. I remember there were rooms, lots of families, there was very little privacy. So it was definitely not a picnic either. And I remember, like I mentioned, many nights, many families, like in one kind of giant room, wasn't a great situation. And as a kid, we kind of tried to pass the time. I played soccer. Everybody played soccer. But what would happen is you'd have these teams at the camp. And what would happen is the different nationalities, the Czechs or the Romanians or the Poles, the adults, they would organize themselves in terms of groups, and they would have these soccer games, and the kids would sort of watch. And that's kind of how I passed the time. And then after 3 months at this camp, we received political asylum. We applied to Canada, Australia, the US, and the US accepted us. Some things haven't changed about America. One of them was that my enduring memory was coming into New York City on the plane. And one of the kids at the camp had said, in America, everyone has guns. So you got to be careful, you might get shot. Again, I was 8. And so I remember just like getting off the plane, looking around like, gosh, somebody gonna shoot me. I was sort of afraid that would happen. And when we got to the US, we were fortunate enough, and maybe you could show the next slide. My dad had a lot of contacts through his work in the church. We had many missionaries that had come to our Polish church. By the way, I don't know why my parents decided to dress both of us the same way. We're not twins. It's a little very early 80s. And my brother's going to kill me if he knows I showed this to like 100 people. But there was an organization called Christ for the Nations Institute, which was a Bible college. And what they basically did is they made it their mission to help, fellow believers kind of behind the Iron Curtain. And that's what they did for us. They were there for us. And again, my dad had that contact in the West. This organization kind of helped us get set up over here. My dad was a maintenance person for them. My mom worked in the nursery. They kind of got us on our feet in Dallas, Texas. And then we were there for a couple of years before coming to Florida, where we established ourselves. Now, when you're an immigrant child, of that age, particularly 7, 8, 9 years old, you have difficulties in terms of assimilating And you're going to have that obviously with the folks that you serve when you don't know the language. And I didn't know English. And so I was supposed to go into the second grade, but I didn't really even know the alphabet. I mean, it was very different. So my brother and I, we were put into preschool, so we could learn the alphabet for a little while. And then we learned, a couple weeks in there, and I thought I was ready for second grade. And I want to just share a story with you. And this is what I call the spelling test moment for me, which is, it was my first day in second grade, and the teacher gave us this test, right? And she basically says, spell these words. And I spelled those words, and I spelled them in Polish. Like, I spelled them how they sounded phonetically. I had read books. I read much of the Bible in Polish. I was a very literate kid for that, for that age. And I spelled it all correctly. I spelled it because I knew how to spell it, in my own way, in my own context. And of course, when I got the results back, everything was wrong, which was devastating. And because I had done everything right, and it didn't matter. And so my point is, your refugee kids in particular are going to have those moments, the spelling test moments that no matter what you do, no matter how well you do it, it's not enough, And my challenge to you is, how are you going to be there for them in those moments? And in my case, we had an English tutor who helped me, who got me through, who was there for me. And eventually I started doing better. Started doing well on my tests, to the point where I was able to skip a grade and then get back on track with my peers. When we arrived in America, it was November. So it was 3 months after we had been in this camp, and it was Thanksgiving. And I just remember that there wasn't a holiday like it in Poland. There was no day to sort of give thanks. And so to this day, Thanksgiving is always my favorite holiday. My favorite moment from this time, and I'll never forget it, was the first time I walked into an American supermarket. Because in Poland, all the supermarkets, they were kind of drab. Food was rationed, empty shelves, right? I remember the first time I walked into an Albertsons in Dallas, Texas. I think I must have begged my parents to buy every single item in that store. It was awesome just to see. And I kind of knew at that point that, hey, things were going to be okay. And then eventually we were able to make our way to Florida. My Polish turned to perfect English. I eventually made my way to the University of Florida, got my BA, got my master's. I made a great decision when I met my wife at the University of Florida. And then eventually I made my way to the Bureau. And then if you turn to the next slide, we've now got a couple of kids, 14-year-old twins. We actually attend Hyde Park United Methodist Church, where Sally is our pastor. And so I feel like we've got, no, not that one. That's old school, but there's another, there we go. That's a tradition in our church to take, at Easter, to take a photo next to the Easter cross. And that's my family today. So to close up, everyone has a story. My story isn't unique. There are a lot of problems in this country, as everybody can see it. But still, what makes this country special and great is the willingness to take in the stranger, to give people a chance at a new life. So you and your organizations, just want to thank you again, because you have a chance to make a difference in people's lives. You have a chance to meet them in those roadside moments where everything could change for the worst. You have a chance to meet them in their darkest moments. And I challenge you to be there for them in the same way that others were there for me and my family. So with that, I will turn it over to Susanna. Thank you all so much, and thank you for the work that you do. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mark. Next slide, please. So I am the dedicated civil rights agent assigned to investigate civil rights matters in Tampa, and I am going to tell you a little bit more about our program. But the mission of the civil rights programs is to enforce federal civil statutes and to ensure that the protected rights of all people are not violated. The reason I have all persons highlighted in red is because whether a person is here documented or undocumented, they are protected under our constitutional rights. Next slide. The Civil rights is the fifth category in the top 10. The first, obviously, being protect the United States against terrorist attacks, followed by counterintelligence, espionage, cyber crimes, public corruption, and number 5, as you can see, is civil rights. It is that important to our agency because if we let it go unchecked, especially in hate crimes, it gives root to domestic terrorism. Next slide. And under our civil rights program, we work closely with our headquarters, which is in Washington, D.C. We work very closely with the Department of Justice, both here in downtown Tampa, as well as Main Justice, who have dedicated trial attorneys dedicated in each of these categories that I'm going to talk to you about. They're always willing to let us run different matters by them. They provide guidance and wisdom and direction at times. And the 3 categories are color of law, which is your typical excessive use of force. But it's not just that, it's really anybody that has been provided with local authority, such as a judge or myself that can execute arrest warrants or search warrants, or a nurse at a correction facility, anybody that has authority and abuses that authority, we consider that a color of law cases. The most common that you might see would be like the police using their excessive use of force, or at the prisons with inmates, denial of care, sexual assaults, etc. Hate crimes, which is highlighted in red because it is our highest priority. Hate crimes are any typical crime such as arson, graffiti, physical assault, so anything that's considered a crime, but it has to be solely motivated. The crime took place because of somebody's national origin, race, religion, sexual identity, disability, etc. So if that crime was committed because of one of those special categories, we consider that a hate crime. And here we understand that refugees are a very vulnerable community. That's why we wanted to, again, introduce ourselves. I want to also let you know that we would be happy to come talk to your community members. Anybody that is wanting to learn more about our program, we would definitely like to let them know so they know if something happens, where to report it, how to report it, etc. And our last category is freedom of access to clinic entrances, which is typically any crime that we see at a reproductive facility. Nobody can interfere, intimidate, injure with anyone either providing or receiving reproductive services. Fortunately, we don't see a lot of these types of crimes, at least here in our area. It's called FACE for short. I will talk to you more about international human rights. It's a different unit, but if something were to happen here in our area, we would handle it under the Civil Rights Program. Next. So I wanted to talk to you about hate crimes versus hate incident. I did talk to you about what a crime is, but a hate incident is pretty much your freedom of speech type statements that are considered racial or intimidating. So it's non-threatening, offensive language. You know, your typical flyers are placed on maybe at the temple, you know, different religious institutions, anything that is doesn't rise to a crime, but it is an incident. We do want to know about both because, as you know, MARC is an intelligence agency analyst, which their job is to collect statistics and information because our goal is to prevent and deter incidents from happening. Now, if the FBI is aware of a threat to life type of situations, please be assured that we will let you know ahead of time. But we are here to try to prevent anything from happening. We want the community to report it. We want them to feel safe in reporting and not feel like there's going to be any retaliation for reporting it. There is a website that can do that online at www.ic3.gov. And we also have linguists, so we can talk to our victims in whatever language that they speak. As far as the presentations, I'm a Spanish speaker. I can deliver presentations in Spanish, but if not, I can get a linguist to come talk to your community members with whatever their language of preference is. Next slide. And international human rights, which is not part of our civil rights per se, but this is a totally separate unit that I think sit very closely together in Washington, D.C. And we do play a vital role in our government response. And the main categories that we investigate would be the genocide, torture, war crimes, and the recruitment of child soldiers. Next slide. And for us to be able to begin investigation or open an investigation, the perpetrator or target has to be is a U.S. person, or the victim is a U.S. person. And if for some reason the perpetrator, regardless of what nationality he or she is located within the United States. If we have one of these categories, we are able to begin investigating. Next slide. And international human rights cases are of a priority for us, for sure. We collect, again, and enhance information such as analysts like Mark, and we provide training and technical assistance not only to our community, but also to our local law enforcement if they need it. We don't just investigate. Most of our job also is liaison with different agencies as well as providing training, and we do so here with the international human rights cases. Next slide. And in conclusion, if there's not an incident that is not prosecutable, it doesn't mean that it's over. We have other recourses such as civil, which somebody can file a lawsuit. The case or matter can also be prosecuted in state versus federal court. And just to keep in mind that every state in the United States has different set of law and hate crimes. I know there are 5 states that actually do not have any hate crimes, either enhancements or laws. Here in Florida, what they do is that if they commit a crime, and if it's a hate crime, they can add an enhancement to the crime itself, where we would just prosecute it straight out as a federal hate crime case. But that is also another avenue for resolution on a matter. Next slide. And next slide. Oh, is that okay? So this is duplicate. Sorry about that. But if you have any questions, we will take them. Otherwise, this is my name, my telephone number, my email, and as well as Mark.
Yep.
If you have anything else.
No.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that information and for sharing your story with us too, Mark. We really appreciate that. Any questions or comments? I'm sure folks will be in touch with you about presentations. Okay.
Great. Fantastic.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. All right, last but not least, our presentation is from Ramsey Jawad, who is the lead attorney at Lutheran Services Florida. He's going to walk us through the different folks that we're hearing about a lot right now and what their immigration status means for their immigration journey here. And so Ramsey, I know you're so busy. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today and just kind of give us a little overview of what we can better understand how to help clients and how to address, some of the immigration concerns that they have, whether they're border crossers, Afghans, or Ukrainians, as we're hearing more and more from as well. So I'll turn things over to you now, Ramsey.
Perfect. Can everybody see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible? Oh, there we go. Perfect. I'm not very tech savvy, so it's always nice having some support with the slides. But yeah, as Janet introduced earlier, my name is Ramsey Jawad. I am the one of the attorneys here at LSF, specifically overseeing our DCF contracted services. We also have another attorney. His name is Tim Drahovsky, and he runs our fee-based services. So essentially, any service or any client that doesn't fall within my realm of services can be referred and to specifically Mr. Drahovsky, so he can help them out. But yeah, so I pretty much just set 3 slides up just to kind of give a roadmap and a little bit of guidance for these specific groups of our clients. That way, whenever you meet them in the community, they come to your offices, you can already kind of tell them in general terms, right, what's available to these populations. So first and foremost, we'd be starting with our Cuban entrants, and most of the times the options that are available to most immigrants that are and refugees that are coming to our offices, it's really the paper trail. The documents that they get when they come into the country, a lot of times is what creates the roadmap. So for Cubans specifically, they enter the country. Most of the times they're detained, and then they're released, right? So the documents that they're given upon release from detention is really what sets up what their options are. So that's why I categorized it in two groups. You have the parolees, which are really the individuals that are in the best position to get immigration relief and benefits. And then you also have those who receive the I-220A, which is the release on recognizance form. I gave the acronym ROR on the presentation, and also those clients that are released on a bond. So the clients who are released on parole have the easiest route to actually getting immigration benefits. Once they're in, having that parole entitles them to apply for work permit immediately, and they can get that work permit for the duration of their parole. For the most part, it's a year. I know a lot of our clients, a lot of the Cuban clients that are coming to our offices now are getting short-term paroles, because I know ICE and at the border, they were essentially just allowing people to come in on very temporary paroles just to complete processing here in the States. The issue with those very short-term paroles of 2 weeks, 2 months, is that when it comes to applying for a work permit, the chances of that work permit getting filed and approved within the time that their parole is actually pending and current, it's pretty much almost impossible. So for our team, our office here, we're not doing work permits for the clients that have that very short temporary parole. But if they do have a 1-year parole, those are the individuals that should immediately, the moment they can, apply for work permits, because the idea is they're going to hopefully get it before their parole ends. And the individuals who come in with the parole as well, the biggest benefit of coming with the official paroles is that they can apply for a Cuban adjustment at the year and a day mark, right? And that is the easiest, the quickest route to getting residency, right? Applying for the green card at the year and a day of entry into the U.S. So meaning not release, not the moment they come from detention, into the communities, but no, entry into the U.S., right? That's really that's the date that you can start counting what the year and a day mark is. They can apply for Cuban adjustment, so they can hopefully at some point soon get their green card status, and then once they get that, they wait the 5 years and they can apply for citizenship. So those are really the big benefits for our Cuban parolees, right? They have the easiest roadmap. It's as simple as it gets. Now for the other group, where we have the clients who have the I-220A, the release on recognizance, the bonds, the law isn't necessarily in their favor as well as it is for the parolees, right? So with those documents, they're not eligible for a work permit, so they can't apply for a work permit the moment they come. Just like all refugees or all immigrants that come into the U.S., asylum is always an option and should really be considered, because if they're considering wanting to apply for asylum, if they're interested in that form of relief, they have to submit that filing with either whoever has jurisdiction. It could be USCIS, it could be the courts, but they have to submit that filing within the year of entry. So again, it's based on the date that they come into the country, not their date of release, right? So they definitely want to file that asylum case within the year if they qualify for such relief, right? The benefit of also applying for asylum is that is a way that they can get a work permit after 150 days of filing that specific application, right? So they can't apply for work permit based on being a parolee because they're not a parolee. However, after filing that asylum application, that's another category that allows them to apply for a work permit. And so that they would have to wait 150 days after that specific filing so they can apply for that benefit. However, one thing that I tell, and because I would say majority of our clients that are coming to our office now, the Cuban entrants are coming in with the I-220, with the ROR, or the bonds. I let them know, hey, you can go down 2 roads if you want. Applying for asylum is one form of relief, right? That you can try that out. But I also recommend that they apply for Cuban adjustment. The law isn't as clear when it comes to Cuban adjustments and those individuals who weren't given specifically a parole. It's kind of in a gray area. Some judges, some USCIS officers believe it's the same as a parole. Not everyone's on the same page. So that's why I say it's a gray area, right? But really, they should be fighting for every option that's available for them. So my recommendation is, as long as they qualify for asylum, they fit the narrative. They should apply for asylum within the year, and at a year and a day, they should also apply for Cuban adjustment. So that's kind of the roadmap for those individuals, and those are really their options. One thing I noted on the bottom, and it's kind of worked a few times for some of our clients here in Tampa, is, most of the major cities have ICE offices. So usually people who come in already have a date where they have to report to the ICE office. There's nothing wrong with going to your ICE officer. Usually it's just a check-in. They just want to make sure you're around, confirm address and phone number, and that's it. But there's nothing wrong with asking for a parole. They have the power to give a parole, give an extension. And I've seen it. I've seen some individuals that have a 2-week parole go ask for a parole, and they give them a year extension. Or individuals who have an I-220, the release on recognizance or a bond, and they ask for a parole. Sometimes the officers give it to them. So they may just get lucky. You just go in, maybe take them some chocolates or some sweets, and maybe they'll be a little more willing. But it never hurts to do that. And again, just emphasizing, the roadmap for the parolees is pretty straightforward. For those, the RORs and the bonds, try both. If you're eligible for both types of forms of relief, the Cuban adjustment and asylum, they're not mutually exclusive. You can go down both roads. So I always recommend that to everyone that's coming in with those entry documents. So that's essentially the roadmap that I've set up for our Cuban entrants. And next up, I also set up a slide for our Afghans that are in our communities. So most Afghan families and individuals that are in the community, they're pretty much all here. I'd say vast majority are here on humanitarian paroles for 2 years, right? So that means they're legally present in the U.S. They, for the most part, should all have work permits already, because when they arrive to the country, that's already been most of the time applied for. So I'm sure most clients that you have already have the work permit, so that's good. So that's not something we necessarily have to worry about too much. But I know the main concern and the questions that I get is, how do we get a green card? How do we get residency? We always want to know about status, right? And again, it's very determinative on kind of like their forms, the forms that they came in with, what they potentially applied for abroad, and it's pretty much broken down in four, but I would say mainly 3 options. First and foremost is the Special Immigrant Visa, SIV, and that's for individuals who were employed by the U.S. government or U.S. military while they were in Afghanistan for 2 years. And having an approved SIV, so those individuals that apply for SIV, get it approved, they can, the moment they get that specific approval for that application, they can apply for residency. So that's why I kind of put that at the top in terms of options for relief, because it is the quickest way, again, to getting a green card. They don't have, there's no waiting period for once they get that approval, they can immediately apply for residency with the I-485. However, obviously you have to meet the requirements, right? Again, you have to have works for the U.S. government, U.S. military, and you have to have, and if some individuals that I've seen have already come in with an approved SIV, and the people who have already an approved SIV, and they come in with their passport where it shows like an I-551, which is the code for lawful permanent residence, they essentially don't really have to do much more. They should be expecting their green card at some point. But for the individuals who have an approval, but came in just with the regular parole and they never got any I-551 stamp in their passports, those individuals are eligible to apply for adjustment for residency immediately. And I've seen some cases like that. It's not the majority, but some individuals are eligible. As long as they have an SIV approval, they can apply for residency immediately. So SIV is really, once you start looking at the documents, it's kind of easy to determine who falls into that category. And usually it's because you see documents like letter of recommendation from their previous employer, work verification, if they have something called a COM letter, chief of mission, approval, which is something that they have to request specifically to apply for SIV. Once you see those documents, you kind of already know like these individuals are going to be likely SIV clients that that's what we want to pursue. Then you have the second option, which is family-based immigration, right? That's pretty much if we have clients who have U.S. citizen or resident family members, close family members, those family members can petition for them to get them some kind of status. But again, they have to have, the requisite family members that can actually petition for them. So that's a matter of just asking, do you have American family members who are residents or citizens? And if they don't, then you already know that's not really going to be an option for them. And then last but not least, employment-based VAWA UNT visas are also options, but that's not something that I'm seeing very often. So I'm not really going to go too far into those options. But I did want to talk about asylum because asylum is an option for every immigrant and refugee that comes into the U.S. That's essentially the last ditch resort, and it's going to be an option that I would say for majority of our Afghan clients that are coming to our offices, because for those individuals who can't fall under any other category, can't apply for SIV, don't have U.S. citizen family members or resident family members, they're not going to be able to get any of those benefits. So asylum is really going to be their only option. It is the more difficult option that you have to specifically say, you have to state your reasons for persecution back in Afghanistan. You have to go to interviews. You have to have, the USCIS officers approve it. Once you get approved, you have to wait a year to then be able to apply for green cards. So the process is longer and more complicated. But I do see most of our clients are probably going to fall under that category of that being their option for relief. But really going after any of these options, any of these four options, and again, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do asylum, you can do SIV if they want, right? Like those are always options. But getting some approvals of these specific benefits that's what's going to pave the road for them getting green cards and eventually getting citizenship if everything goes well. So now talking about Ukrainian entrants, and I put refugees in parentheses because we call them refugees, but officially they're not coming in as refugees. For the most part, they're coming in as visitors or parolees. So that's, and I put two little resources that Janet shared with me that were pretty useful. That pretty much says the difference between someone having a refugee status and someone having a humanitarian parole. Having these legal forms of entry, having the parole, having the visas, just allows them to legally be here in the U.S., but it's temporary. It doesn't actually provide them a formal status. They still have to try to find some form of actually getting status. And for the most parts, asylum is also going to be an option for them, just like it is for everybody else. They should be considering asylum if they want to get, if they actually want to get status, they can consider family petitions as well. If they want temporary protection, which for the most part they're coming in with paroles. Again, they keep having a parole for 2 years keeps them safe, but they can also apply for TPS, which is temporary protected status. That if these individuals have the TPS, they don't have to worry about getting deported. Again, also if having pending paroles is also going to keep them safe, but that's not going to get them any status, any relief. They still have to consider options that will actually get them permanent status here in the U.S. because as TPS and having paroles and these visitor visas, those are all temporary options. Right now, our office isn't really servicing. We're not offering services to Ukrainians at the moment. That may change, but I did want to at least give a little bit of a roadmap for these individuals so we can kind of help calm some people's nerves and tell them that there are options there are things that they can do to at least remain legal here in the U.S.